It's always about what are the steps and how do we improve it, and what data matters and what data is relevant at that point in time.
Welcome to the Industrial Cybersecurity Insider. In each episode, we dive into the world of industrial cybersecurity. Join us as we cover the latest trends, innovations, and practical insights as we talk with leaders and practitioners across the industry. Gear up and let's get into this week's episode.
Hi, I'm Dino Busalachi, and today I have one of my famed colleagues, Kevin Kumpf. Kevin, how you doing?
Good, sir. How are you today?
Good.
Pleasure to see you again.
Yeah, it was good seeing you last week in Chicago at Rockwell Automation Fair. What was your take on what you saw at the fair last week?
I think from a visualization on the floor perspective, there was more booths showing data and information, and there was less large manufacturing or, the packaging plant content, which was great. And I saw a lot of people at the booths, really engaging in those ones that had content to share. And I also saw people really, engaging with each other on the floor and asking questions, which was great for the industry.
Yeah, and for our listeners, for you that may be unfamiliar with Rockwell Automation Fair, it's kind of their Super Bowl event that they do I guess they've been doing it over 30 years now. And it moves around from coast to coast, middle of the country. Every third year it goes back to Chicago. But it's everything Rockwell, so all of their partners, the OEMs, and their asset owners attend this event. It was pretty well attended. I don't know, maybe close to 20,000 people might have been there for that event last week.
Yeah, it was about 20,000 from the numbers that I've heard as well.
So a couple of things. One of the things that I wanted to talk about is the Rockwell has rebranded their network security services program, managed services, the Verve platform to Secure OT, right? Which, one of the things that I want to talk about in regards to managed services, which I think is becoming very prevalent on the manufacturing side. IT obviously has been doing outsourcing and managed services for quite a while, and it's never been something that's been available to manufacturers, just because of the nature of their business and the machine centers and the connectivity, non-connectivity, the technology challenges and hurdles that are out there, cybersecurity challenges and hurdles that are out there. But that environment's changing, and it's changing rapidly. And so what are your thoughts on the managed services play with manufacturing?
Well, you're seeing an interesting trend. First off, when you look at, Rockwell's acquisition of Verve, and then you look at others that have come out with, Mitsubishi Electric now with Nozomi, and Honeywell's with SCADAfence. There's been this sort of pause, and what do we do with the technology? And there was always the old saying, IBM or, others out there, where good technology goes to, die, in that sort of vernacular. What we're seeing now is that they're trying to take products, rebrand them, and put a focus on it. And they're trying to now give you the data that you need to be effective, like we've had many years in IT, but now put it into an OT lens. And while I think it's a great start, the question I always keep rolling around in my mind is, who is going to find this data actionable? Who is going to be able to look at this and understand the context? And it's not going to be IT, and it's not going to be just OT. It's going to have to be that blend. So I think we're finally starting to see tools that can give IT to OT convergence as an industry.
Yeah, that's what I call the three-legged stool, right? It's the asset owners, the OT piece, the client side of the house. Then you have IT, and then you have the OEMs and system integrators, right? Because they play a significant role in the success of manufacturing facilities being able to produce and operate efficiently making goods, right? No client can do it by themselves. They buy these machine centers. They don't have the engineering staff per se internally. And so they rely on third parties. And so how do you, work towards an environment that's decentralized, right? A lot of varying different types of technologies being deployed within a single client, but even within the same client, within their fleet of plants, right? Which is very hard for IT, I think, to get their arms around. And so you have to be able to work with that OT ecosystem who have that familiarity with operations, industrial control systems, the infrastructure that those control systems run on, and how those are designed and built to deliver the data and operate those applications. Flipping it back to the managed services side, The only way you can really pull this off is you're going to have to bring those in. I've said this in several of our podcasts. Executives on the IT side, CIOs, CISOs, for example, need to build a relationship with who those top OEMs and system integrators are that are operating in their manufacturing facilities. That's a huge gap that we see because we work in a lot of these manufacturing facilities for decades, years, big projects, all sorts of projects, and then also doing maintenance and support. But we don't hear or see anything from IT on what they're trying to do from an OT cybersecurity perspective, trying to drive and improving that cybersecurity posture for the client and getting direction for them, or at least having a dialogue. It just seems that's a miss in that IT-OT convergence conversation.
The biggest miss is if you take it from each side of the fence. IT is patch now, patch when the update's out there, keep everything's up to date, have an automated service. You can track all your assets, your people, process, technology. When you flip over the wall and you go to OT, that's not really possible. The other biggest challenge is, and you know this, if you look at any of the point products out there, and that's a point product to me is an individual application deployed in OT to do a functional purpose. And so you look at any of the asset management, threat and vulnerability detection tools like that. As you walk around facilities, 5 years in, companies have it deployed 15%.
Yeah, well, and look at remote access and the dozens of different ways that they prop up some type of pathway into their plan. It's not standardized jump boxes, cradle point cellular modems, internet ISPs directly into the plan. There's just a bevy of different things that are found in a single site. To your point solutions.
Yep. And so when you look at IT, they like unified solutions now. You don't have 3 or 4 different mail programs out there. You don't have 3 or 4 different Zooms or Teams or anything else out there.
Or operating systems,
Exactly. And so while you have specific applications like I have a pharmaceutical company, which many people look as an IT-based company, but it really is basically more OT-based. It's manufacturing in many of them with, strict guidance. But all those systems have to be regulated and they all are controlled. In OT, every plant acts as its own individual, cell or production facility, but even every line in that plant acts as an individual. So You're trying to take this, everybody get in the same direction and path of IT and move it to OT. And there's a line I love that, was in the TV episode MASH years ago, where Frank Burns said, "I'm all for individuality. Individuality is great as long as we're all doing it at the same time and doing the same thing." And so that is in reality what we're really trying to do, is saying, how do we take that IT, walled corridor that they have down to a science and bring it to OT, which is, randomness at every single cell production line facility.
So let's talk about some of the technologies that you're working on and what you're focused on in regards to OT managed services platforms.
So one of the things is I'm working right now consulting for several entities out there. And, I've had people come to me and say, I need secure access because of my prior life of where I came from. But I said, you don't need secure access. You need a platform for this. And working with you and others in the industry and hearing over and over again how they need a managed platform, the vision that I see out there is something that you have already that, you're not looking to bolt other pieces on, called DG360. And so this would now give that 360-degree view of the facility from a people, process, technology, from level 0 all the way out, that you now can manage for customers who don't have the resources due to Silver Tsunami, who don't have the skills on site because, there is not 10 engineers at every plant that know every single thing. And that really are leveraging you for your experience because of your been there, done that, abilities with, Barry Waymiller.
Right. And the question is depending on the manufacturer and the vertical they're in, some are really trying to figure it out, right? Investing, working with their consultants and their partners. But then there's a lot of them out there that are not, right? They've been doing what they've been doing for decades. And even though technology has seeped in to their environment, they really haven't put together a strategy on how to tie it all together, per se. Right. In fact, the decentralized approach, the plants being individual, having their own P&L, right? Working with their local SIs and OEMs that they like, that they've been using for years, and their sites, and not having any commonality on really trying to strengthen their cybersecurity posture or their managed services that, can be beneficial for removing unplanned, unscheduled downtime, improving efficiencies, getting that key data up into your ERP or MES systems. That's a struggle for a lot of organizations, at least from what I've witnessed.
Yeah, and you hit the key point with profit and loss. Having come from companies like Case New Holland, where we had multiple facilities around the globe, it was feast or famine in the budgets. Or the facilities that made the $1 million machines or hundreds of thousands of dollars machines and put them off the line, they were viewed as revenue generators. The plant that made the 50-cent bearing that had to go into these vehicles and these off-highway components, they were viewed as you don't have a budget. So if it was fix a hole in the roof or a hole in the parking lot or do cybersecurity or managed services, which way it was going due to OSHA and other things.
Right.
You have to treat your
as a plant manager making that decision, So I don't know much about cybersecurity, but I know I need that roof leak fixed,
Exactly. And so if you can offer an ecosystem platform that says, look, we'll take every facility that you have, we'll drop in, your vision of DG 360, this unified platform of technology and services, and we can handle it all for you, then you're enriching everybody, and then you can have that visibility everywhere.
Yeah.
That way you can know what's going on, even at the part that makes the 50-cent piece, that plant, that it's going to impact things 2 weeks down the line up here when they can't get that $1 million machine off the line.
Yeah. And the technologies is just part of the problem. I think one of the keynote sessions I listened to at the Rockwell Automation Fair, technology is 20% of the challenge. It solves challenges and issues. 80% of it's people.
Let's pause there a second. What is it about the people that you feel is the problem? What do you feel that 80% is comprised of?
It's everything that we've been kind of talking about up to this point, with the individuality of the organizations, within the corporate side, at the plant side, IT, OT, SIs, OEMs, all kind of pulling sometimes in different directions instead of pulling together. And it varies by industry, in the life sciences industry, some of those regulatory requirements they have just to make simple changes within the environment can take quite a long time to implement. If you can get through it, might take a year. Right. In other organizations, it's like the technology is moving faster than plants typically can and will. As we both know, the assets within a manufacturing facility are out there for decades, right? It's not something that, every 3 to 5 years, they can't handle disruption. They want to try to minimize that. So to them, implementing anything new is just things that disrupt their ability to operate and produce goods, without really recognizing what can I do that isn't disruptive if I put the right people in there that know how to operate within a manufacturing facility that aren't going to be disruptive, who understand vulnerability management, change management, patch management, vendor management, cyber monitoring, compliance, infrastructure, incident, threat, all of it, right? How do you find that? You don't have it in-house. You don't. Even if you have people that say they can do that, you only have a few, and you got 50 plants in your fleet. Think globally, act locally. So you got to be able to do it at that local level, right? They're not going to have the capital to just go and rip and replace holistically through their environment. They can't even do it with their control systems that have been out there for 30 years.
And so if we look at the people that were walking around A-Fair this year, okay, you saw a lot of the old guard, the people that were there dressed in the jeans, the boots and things. I saw one guy working my side of the street in a hard hat and a lab coat, so I got to make sure that's addressed next year. But you saw a lot of young people there at the booth trying to explain products. And when you tried to dive into something even, 2 levels deep, the deer in the headlights came out. And so I'm looking at this and saying, to your point about the 80%, it's not that they can't find the able bodies. I mean, that's one issue. But the other side of that coin is, even if they found the able bodies, they don't have the level of experience and training and all the products that you do. So you may have somebody in a plant that is great at one certain product or one vendor's basically applications, but they're not knowledgeable to go, I'm going to go from Rockwell to Yokogawa to Siemens and understand how all these components work, and then be able to articulate that back to somebody in IT and say, here's the problem, how do we solve it? They're point solutions. And that's really what DG 360 and your organization is bringing to the table. Is you have people from all walks of life that have done a myriad of things, that you can be that human factor in saying, the tech is the tech, but let me tell you from my experience what the tech is doing and why it matters to you.
Let's talk a little bit about the uniqueness of the platform that we've been talking about for the last few months, right? In regards to managed services, remote access, and building a single pane of glass, I guess, for lack of a better term, with all of the clients, in this case, in manufacturing plant locations, all the application systems infrastructure they have in their environment for cybersecurity tools. How do you paint that single pane of glass for them?
To me, it's a very straightforward vision, and if you look at Six Sigma, Lean, or any of these things that I've been through, it's always about what are the steps and how do we improve it and what data matters and what data is relevant at that point in time. And so when you go into a facility, you can build it basically from the slab up. Every single component in that building, you manage the project, you have the resources to do that. And then you drop in basically, your production components. Within that cabinet, DG360 can now be a server that sits in that cabinet. And as you are looking at this facility from that 360-degree view, you say, what in this facility is important to me? And what do I need to know from a mean time between failure, uptime, availability, ROI, safety, security? What are all these components? And it doesn't stop at cyber anymore. It's cyber physical. I saw one of the Rockwell areas where they were talking about putting a video camera now on the same screen with the data from an application. And I said, so you see something, you have an application, but what about the user access? What about the facility access to show, is there somebody at that system right now? And they said, we don't do that. And yet with DG360, you can tie that cyber physical together. So now let's say you have your cabinet in the facility. Somebody opens the door, that sensor can go off to know somebody's in the cabinet. Now you can see the changes. Now you can look at things real time and saying, should they be doing this? This is actually an IT version of what IDS started out as, is I want to see that user doing things, even if it's not bad enough to trip my firewall, to know what's going on. So you can look at all the services that are in your ecosystem and say, in one platform in your facility, I can now put this in across all of your plants, balance that budget, balance that P&L, and give you that full view of what's important to you in a single window that we can now manage for you and notify for you. And now you're doing preventive maintenance. You're doing left of boom as opposed to the boom has happened and now you're on the other side of it.
Yeah, because we've all heard about alert fatigue, right? We've witnessed that with certain technologies that go into these manufacturing facilities. And, if you get 10,000 alerts in a day, how do you really pare it down to the ones you need to really focus on, right? And the technologies and tools, and technologies can get you there. I saw some cool AI stuff at Automation Fair last week, that can actually break down, events that are happening within, the control systems, determine which assets or machine centers aren't operating optimally, and it could be due to change, or it could be due to a physical mechanical issue that's going on with that equipment that help speed up that process, right? Again, the tools are becoming available, and I want to be able to take very large events that happen, right? You can tie this stuff back to ticketing systems, right? Somebody opens up the cabinet, a ticket gets generated, it gets assigned to somebody to go and evaluate, why is Joe in this cabinet? There's no change management control workbook that's been executed. So this is an event that's fallen outside of some policy that somebody needs to go investigate. And that's what I see not happening a lot when alerts and events are unfolding in these plants, because it can become so overwhelming because nobody's really structuring it, organizing it, prioritizing that data.
And I was actually happy. We did not get hit with the huge AI tsunami that is permeating other conferences out there. There was samplings of it and areas where it was sprinkled in, but I didn't see people waving a giant flag saying we're AI out there. To me, AI is just basically more actionable intelligence. And to your point about the human factor, that is where we're talking about, if we put all this tech together, you have to have that human in the loop. Human in the loop and human on the loop are two terms in OT that can never just be replaced by saying, I'm going to erase those four letters and replace it with AI. Because you have to have the context, you have to have the data. And you're seeing people take it from historians now, digital twins, analytics. But that's where Barry Waymiller and your platform really come in. You have that knowledge to know, even if I see this, is what I'm seeing what's really going on.
It's like the autonomous cars, right? Can they drive themselves? Yeah, they can. But you still require somebody's butt to be sitting in the seat behind the steering wheel, right? Back to your human in the loop. And it's the same. And when it comes to this environment, it's the same because of safety, right? Because of quality, right? Because you don't want to destroy expensive equipment, or product. And that's why you need to have that human in the loop versus if this, then that, then make this happen, because of an event. Somebody needs to oversee that to see if that's okay, right? And at least in the industrial world, I don't know if you're ever going to get to the point. There might be some things where AI can be used to make decisions on changing what happens to how equipment operates, right? They do it today through control systems, but it's defined, right? It's something that's been practiced and set up and programmed to do, right? Versus having AI going, well, I figured these things are happening, so I can stroke that valve and fire up that pump just based on these conditions.
Yeah, and this gets into the big realm now of smart factories. So you see facilities out there that build Legos and stuff that don't have humans. You walk through, your local Costco, BJ's type place, and you have the robots that go down the aisle scanning things and stuff like that, right? But a lot of these technologies don't fit into, and you know it, going into an existing plant and trying to retrofit. Many times it's impossible. So as you walk the floor and you're, almost weekly, it seems, you're at a plant walking the floor with the facility, you realize there's areas here that this will never become a smart factory. How do you take that smart intelligence of AI and put it down to those lower level components of legacy systems? I still deal with paper tape systems. They're not going away. And I think that's where the biggest human factor comes in, is you need someone to understand paper tape. And it's not the kid coming out of college right now.
That's a whole different beast talking about. I call it the silver tsunami, but obviously there's large swaths of talented folks that have been working in these facilities for decades that are starting to retire. The kids that are coming in today, they're smart, they want to work, but they're looking at a piece of equipment that's 30 years old. And it's like, well, what does it take to really maintain this, and understand the PLC programming, how the infrastructure is put together, what communicates with what applications are being used, the safety protocols, lockout, tagout, all of those things that most of us that have been working in the industrial environment understand well. Training a younger group to come in, you have to make that commitment. You really have to want to make that commitment to bring them in. But I would say when it comes to technology in these plants, because of the complexity, I don't think there's many organizations that can do this all by themselves. They're going to need organizations like ours, or the Rockwells and some of our competitors that provide these services to assist them with these newer technologies coming in, newer control system technologies, networking technologies. I mean, a big term that was being pushed around at Automation Fair was software-defined automation, right? And everybody, if you're an IT person, especially if you're a networking professional, you hear software-defined networks, they got a pretty good grasp of what that is and what that means. But now we're talking about software-defined automation.
And this is an interesting point you bring up. You say, do they have the resources? Well, the holidays are here. And you know that these plants now start to run on skeleton crews or on changeover time.
Yeah, or they're doing maintenance, they're taking the downtime to fix and clean. And
yeah, but for others, it's ramping up. And if you're looking at some of these, Amazon and stuff, their smart facilities, if they were hacked and they don't have eyes on glass to get every little bit of data. I mean, even a barcode scanning system that, the cameras are now focused off just a little bit. All of a sudden, packages aren't going where they should go. Things are backing up. Gifts aren't going to get there and things like that. And what's the response? And that's why, I've worked in facilities where we had a plant in India. The UPS unit tripped. The only guy that knew how to reset it was at another facility covering for somebody else, and he was 8 hours away. So that facility is now down. Having the ability to have eyes on glass with what we're talking about here, that single pane, and having that experience where now, Dino, you can say, hey, I have this person, my team in Pennsylvania, that can get to this plant in Texas in less than 60 seconds through a browser securely and retain their basically data privacy. Everything stays within their boundary and fix the problem and get there with the proper tools. That's a lifesaver. Rockwell's not going to build that, and Yokogawa's not going to build that, or whoever, to basically say, we're going to handle our things and everybody else's. That's why they rely on you guys that say you have the knowledge across the spectrum. to handle that?
I've been saying that a lot through our podcast. The OT ecosystem has to drive this, right, in order to get it to the next level. IT, it's a blind spot for them. I still have CIOs or CISOs that will flat out tell us that they want to keep IT and OT separated. I had a CIO tell me, I don't want to be the SCADA cop. So when you run into those types of scenarios, the organization needs to recognize that so they can pivot and start talking to their OT leadership, the people that are responsible for operations and engineering and manufacturing, to start going out into their partner community, their supply chain community, and start trying to find out what those capabilities, what those practices look like, what are their partner relationships, and start driving this narrative. IT can tag along. You want them to tag along. You want them to be involved. I always say you want them on the field, you want them in the huddle. They just can't be the quarterback, right? And so in that sense, the OT organization is really going to have to spearhead this, in my view. But I'm always open to IT executive leadership that wants to get involved. But their culture and their behavior, you'll be able to determine pretty quickly whether there's something they can actually pull off. Do you have the resources? Do you have the skills? When's the last time you've been to a plant? I mean, I've had IT executives, networking professionals that have never been to their manufacturing facilities or haven't been there in years, and definitely haven't been to all of them. Back to that think global, act local conversation. So until you start seeing that dynamic change, where they're more involved and ingrained and engaged with their OT counterparts, it's a mess. So the OT, you got to pivot to your OT ecosystem and go, I'm going to have to do this with this group in order to be successful. Because that's who I rely on today to help me build my plants, build these machine centers, maintain these machine centers, provide me maintenance and support. I rely on them already.
Yeah. And so to that point, everybody thinks that the things in the industry are pie in the sky, or people talking about things, but they're not here today. The nice thing is about with the DG360 platform, it is here today. All right. It's well established. Your customers are basically using that. It's in their service contracts and things.
Right.
But now what we're adding to it, I can do today. We demonstrated it just walking the floor on a cell phone and saying, look, I can get you here and I can show you data. And the nice thing about it was that we didn't get one person saying, my God, this is fluff or this isn't real. We said, do it on your phone. And how do we do it on that device? And so now this is the point where we can provide actionable alerting real time right now for them to demonstrate. And it's not about let's make this up as we go along. It's like, really, Mr. Customer, we're ready. What do you want to see? Yeah. It's really cybersecurity in action, and it's managed services for the OT industry in action.
Yeah, it's almost like if you ask the client, I think most of them would have an answer, but it's like, what problems are you having? What are you missing? What are your challenges? If you could wave a magic wand, what would it look like for you to have a manufacturing facility being able to operate with OEE numbers that are, in the 80th percentile, right? What would it take for you to get there? What's missing? And then sit down and start from there. And if you turn around and say, well, we have what you need. We got 80% of what you need. We might have 99.99% of what you need. What's holding you back?
And if you asked right now, many of them, if you could wave a magic wand in a cyber incident, what would you do? And you gave them a choice of what they should do. If you had an option there, which is be on a beach somewhere watching the sunset, having a beverage, that would be the easy answer for them, because the other ones would be so hard for them to understand. IT's got playbooks. IT does all the tabletops. OT does tabletops, but when things go sideways at multiple facilities, where are the resources to make that happen? And how do you handle that and manage that? And that's really where the strength of your organization comes in, Dino, is you can have those boots on the ground 24/7, 365 to help these customers.
And have the hooks in to be able to get the data to help make those strategic decisions, right? To help thwart a possible breach that could be spreading through your manufacturing environment, or change behavior of rogue operators that make changes on the fly that are disruptive, that you're not tracking. I mean, that's, when we started implementing these OT IDS platforms, and we're going back a decade now, right? We've been doing this. One of the key things that the engineering teams always glob onto that to them is a wow moment is the fact that you can track PLC changes. Because they know between remote access, internal, external people, helping them manage and maintain their environment, their changes are being made and they're never being seen or caught because they don't have a mechanism in place to do that. But now you put in these deep packet inspection OT/IDS platforms, and somebody gets out there and does an online edit on a PLC, we can tell you exactly who did it, which machine they hit, which PLC they changed, and to the point we can actually track the program, old program, new program, and the difference between the two. Some of these tools are capable of doing that. IT people, to them, their eyes would just glaze over to having that conversation. But you're talking to the controls engineers and process people, they're like, you're kidding, right? Because they didn't have Rockwell Asset Center. They didn't have some other tool in there, some point solution, to your point, that was tracking their control system changes.
And the nice thing is that, over the next couple of weeks, now I know the holidays here, we will actually have this in your environment that people can actually go and test drive it, kick the tires, and look at it real time. And that's one of the key things here is having that real time to say it's here. It's not FUD. It's not something that, we bought a product and a year later, we're trying to figure out how to still put it into our portfolio. That's where we really need to be. I'm happy, we got to do a fair this year. I know it's in a different location next year. I think this will be now my 5th. This is probably your
24th.
24th. But it's a show that everybody, here's one thing I tell people about a fair. Whether you're Rockwell or not, if you're IT and you're in that region, because this was Chicago, come to the show, meet the people that are on the plant floor, understand what matters to them. Because they're not going to go out and meet you at RSA. They're not going to go out and meet you basically at another black hat per se, where, yes, you'll get the OT security people there now, but you never get the people walking the plant floor.
No, you're not going to get the true asset owner. Not at those. You'll see them at Automation Fair or Hanover Messe or other manufacturing conferences of sorts. Like water, wastewater has their own, for example, as oil and gas does too. But yeah, you're not going to find IT people typically at those events, only in the ones where these OT cybersecurity vendors attend the RSAs and the black hats, they're there. And we see IT organizations buy these tools only to see a third of their assets. And all this money, you got, 100 plants, and you're seeing less than a third of all your assets. So what was the point of doing that, right? And you've been doing it for a while. I know clients that have been using these tools for several years, and we're missing, again, 60, 70% of their assets weren't even in the baseline. So they're missing all those events, all those alerts, that asset inventory, all the vulnerability associated with those. They're not tracking any of that stuff. And that was their whole intent on buying it.
Yeah. Well, they bought it. Now they don't have the resources to implement it. Now they don't have the resources to know the who, what, when, where, why, and how, and why that really is driving things. And they don't have a baseline. And
they're not working with the plant. They're not working with the plant either. They're not showing them the value and the benefit of the tool. They're not working with the plant to say, hey, I think I'm missing a bunch of assets in here. Can you walk me around and show me where they are? Here's the ones I see. Here's, which ones are missing out of this list. They're not doing any of that stuff.
No, there's no prioritization.
Right.
Well, I look forward to seeing you again soon. As said to those listening today, we will have this up in your environment in the next couple of weeks that they can kick the tires on everything and anything and see the true power of what DG360 is.
All right. Well, happy Thanksgiving. It's good seeing you.
Happy Thanksgiving. Good seeing you again too, Dino.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to the Industrial Cybersecurity Insider. To stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to click the follow or subscribe button now. And if you found this podcast helpful or have a topic you'd like us to discuss, please leave us a review or let us know. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.